Hello, everyone. Welcome to Women in MSE, the first installment of the six-part outreach webinar series organized by the Department of Material Science and Engineering at NUS. Consistently ranked among the top globally by Times Higher Education NQS, MSE at NUS has made extensive contributions and breakthroughs in areas such as research, education, and innovation, clinching numerous national and international awards to date. With groundbreaking research in areas such as advanced manufacturing, bio-inspired materials, edge computing, and computational material sciences, as well as world-renowned faculty members such as Nobel laureate Professor Sir Konstantin Novoselov, Professor Silvia Graduck, and Professor Barbaros Ozimas, it is unsurprising that MSE at NUS is one of the leading MSE departments in Asia to date. I am Fadila, your moderator for today's session. Before we begin, let me give you a brief introduction to the outreach webinar series that we're having today. In conjunction with the MSE Roadshow, the six-part webinar series is organized with the aim to showcase and raise awareness about the potential roles and career opportunities available to MSE graduates. Over the next few weeks, we have invited different distinguished speakers from various fields to each give a talk on the careers that they have embarked on. For a more interactive experience, the webinar will be split into two parts. The first, being the talk by the invited speakers, and the second, being the one Q&A, where the invited speakers, as well as Associate Professor Daniel Blackwood, Deputy Head of Education and Student Affairs at MSE, will answer questions by members of the audience. Members of the audience may submit their questions to the webinar Q&A and indicate if they have a preference for the speaker to answer their questions. Do remember to complete the survey prompted at the end of the webinar. In today's webinar, we are very fortunate to have with us three inspiring women who will grant us a sneak peek into their lives as an academic, a process and equipment engineering manager, as well as a research scientist. They are Professor Silvia Graduck, Dr. Shan Cho, and Dr. Yang Le. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. First up, we have Professor Silvia Graduck. Prof. Graduck joined NUS in July 2019 and holds the joint appointment of both a full professor in the Department of Material Science and Engineering, MSE, as well as the director in the Office of the Deputy President of Research and Technology. Prior to joining NUS, she was a full professor she's a professor of the Material Science and Engineering at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. Her research interest lies in the area of nanophotonics and electronics, including the synthesis, characterization, as well as the integration of low-dimensional material systems. By leveraging unique material properties on the nanoscale, Prof. Graduck explores novel applications such as nanoscale light-emitting sources, single photon sources, and nanowire lasers. Prof. Graduck, please.
Hello, my name is Silvia Graduck, and I'm a professor of material science and engineering at NUS. My research focuses on what I like to call nanomaterials on demand, or the ability to control the structure of the materials with atomic precision for targeted applications. And before I tell you something about my research, let me briefly introduce myself. So I was born and raised in Croatia, which is a small country in Europe. And in fact, it has a population that is less than that of Singapore. It has 4 million people roughly. And from my early childhood, I was very much impressed by astronomy and astrophysics, and I wanted to be an astronaut. And for that reason, during my high school days, I frequently visited summer schools focusing on astronomy. And I also, when it was time to decide on my undergraduate studies, I enrolled into the Faculty of Physics in Zagreb in Croatia. I was really very passionate about astronomy and I really wanted to be an astrophysicist. And that was the obvious choice for me at that time. What I did not know is that I did not really know too much about physics and material science and other scientific disciplines too much. And when I started to learn about them, I started to understand that it is not only the astrophysics that really appeals me, but it is a scientific discipline. And in fact, I discovered other scientific disciplines in physics specifically, and the one that really attracted my attention and sparked my passion was the physics of condensed matter. So this is the branch of sciences that focuses on understanding the materials and matter and how we can change the material to change its properties. So I also very much became passionate about applied side of sciences and hands-on experiences. I still am very much impressed by astronomy and astrophysics, but I'm really started to become a very hands-on person. So I really enjoy the experiments in which we have the ability to control and change the experiment itself, to put the hypothesis. And instead of only observing the things like in astronomy, we can actually predict and hypothesize what will happen, test the experiment, and then make the conclusion. So as I mentioned during my undergraduate studies, I became very much passionate about the condensed matter physics. And for that reason, I pursued PhD studies at EPFL in Switzerland, which is the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Lausanne, where I started to study materials that interact very strongly with light. Specifically at that time, light-emitting diodes based on a very, very new material called gallium nitride emerged. I used electron microscopes to study the structure and the properties of these materials with atomic precision. So in some sense, I replaced telescopes, which are huge instruments to observe distant stars, with an equally huge instrument called electron microscopes to observe the structure on a very small atomic scale. So after finishing my PhD in Switzerland, I pursued my postdoctoral work in chemistry department at Harvard University. I crossed the Atlantic Ocean to pursue my postdoctoral work. And as you can see, I landed in the chemistry department. So that was interesting. Me being a physicist with physics background, I ended up working with a bunch of chemists. And what I realized at that time is that the material science is a very unique interdisciplinary field that combines all of these disciplines that I really care much about, that I'm passionate about. So material science is an interdisciplinary field that combines physics, chemistry, biology, and it really enables us to control materials for targeted applications. I, at that time, became very much passionate about nanomaterials, a new class of structural materials in which we can change the properties of the materials not only by composition, but also by size. For that reason, I started my independent career as an assistant professor first and eventually reached a full professorship at MIT Materials Science Department, where I started my own research group with very talented scientists and PhD students, in which we focused on studies of nanomaterials. And specifically, we looked into how nanomaterials interact with light. So we asked a question, can we design the materials that are much more in absorbing the light, such that we can, for example, produce electricity out of them? The example would be solar cells, in which solar cell itself absorbs the light from sun and transforms it into electricity, which we can use in our everyday life. We also asked the question, can we design the materials that are very much efficient in light emission? Examples would be light bulbs or light emitting diodes, in which we design the materials that very effectively and very efficiently transform the electrical current into light. So there are many other examples that we investigated, but these are just some of the most prominent ones. In 2019, I made a decision to move to Singapore, to NUS. And there are many, many reasons that made that move. One of the reasons is that Singapore is a bubbling place. It's a very exciting and fast-moving place with many amazing activities, with many amazing colleagues, with amazing infrastructure, research infrastructure. And what was really appealing to me at the time when I made the move is the fact that the transition between the basic science to applied science and the product is very, very fast in Singapore. So going from an idea in the laboratory to a real product is really can happen very effectively here. And the reason for that is that at NUS, we have very close collaborations. And in fact, we work with industry partners on many aspects of real life applications in which material science can make an immediate impact. So with this as a background, let me tell you a few sentences about my research. As I mentioned, I work in the field of nanomaterials on demand, or the ability to control and shape the materials with the atomic precision for targeted applications. What that means is that if there is a particular application in which you, for example, want the material to be much more efficient in light emission or better conductor, that in fact you can control the material with the atomic precision to target that particular application and target that specific property of the material. And the reason why nanomaterials are particularly important or interesting from that aspect is because in nanomaterials, in fact exhibit unique properties by virtue of their low dimensionality. What does that mean? It means that conventionally, if you think about materials and you want to change a specific property of that material, conventionally you would change the composition of the material. Let's say that you want to change the material to emit blue instead of red color, or you want the material to be a better electrical conductor, or you want the material to be biocompatible for biomedical applications. Conventionally, throughout the history of sciences, what you would do is you would simply change the composition of the material. What nanomaterials, by virtue of their low dimensionality, or the fact that at least one of the dimensions is squeezed in a nanometer scale, what these materials enable us is to change the properties of the materials not only by composition, but also by the size of that material, or what we called an aspect ratio. For example, what is the length of that material relatively to its width, or even by changing slightly the surface chemistry of the material. So even with the same composition of the material itself, we can change the properties of the materials by changing size, aspect ratio, or surface. One example would be nanoparticles, also known as quantum dots. So that these are the tiny, tiny pieces of semiconducting materials typically that are range in the sizes between, let's say, 10 nanometers down to only a few nanometers. And even if you start with the same composition and change the size of these nanoparticles, small spheres, from 6 nanometers to 2 nanometers in size, the color of the particles that are suspended in the solution will change from red to blue. And remember, the composition remains the same. The only thing that we're doing is changing the size. And I won't go into details, but there is a very well developed understanding of how that happens with the size. But in fact, quantum confinement effects play a critical role. So then you can ask a question, are nanomaterials very new? Are these very contemporary materials? And in fact, people have been using nanomaterials throughout the history without knowing that they're using nanomaterials. Very famous example are stained glass materials. So what I'm showing here, this beautiful picture, is a window it's a north rose window from Notre Dame de Paris Cathedral. And this particular window was built in 13th century. And as you can see, the color of this glass is changing and the details are changing. And how this glass was made is simply by using the transparent glass that we use in everyday life, in our windows, etc., and mixing them in the molten state with metal salts. And people throughout the history would just simply do this. They would take the molten glass, mix some of the metal salts, and by changing the ratio and the types of the salts that they mix, they would get different color. So another example that I would like to mention is so-called Lycurgus cup that is shown here. It's even earlier throughout the history. It originates from the 4th century, and it's currently being kept in the British Museum. It has a similar type of a stained glass. And as I mentioned, people have been using nanomaterials throughout the history without knowing, simply empirically, through recipes. Again, cooking and trying different things and mixing them up. only modern methods like electron microscopy, in fact, gave us the ability to understand why these materials look or appear different with different cells. And what happens in this particular example is that there are small particles, metal particles, that give different colors. And depending on the size and the composition of these metal particles, the color of the glass would change. So what is really exciting is that now we don't only have these empirical ways, but in fact, we have the ways to predict and modulate the properties of these materials. Another more contemporary example of engineering nanostructure materials is one example that I'm working on currently very actively as a part of the Applied Materials Corporate Lab. So this is an example of a transistor and the very first prototype of a transistor that was developed in 1947. So transistors are also commonly known as nerves inside of your computers. Or when you think about your computers or handphones, there are millions and thousands and millions of these transistors nowadays in your phones. And as you can see, the very first transistor was much bigger, right? So it was the size of the palm of our hand. And throughout the history of the science, we were able to squeeze down these transistors and in fact pack thousands and millions of them in a single phone. And this is how these transistors look like now. So instead of having this bulky transistor device, individual transistors are now much, much smaller. So, and how small they are. And in fact, when you look at the size of a typical virus, you could see that you can pack roughly 10 of these transistors within the size of a single virus. They are so small that in fact, we tune the properties and change the properties of individual transistors in your phones and your computers by simply changing these sizes and the shapes of these pillars in the transistors. And now we operate in the regime where each individual atom matters. So these dots in this particular image represent individual atomic columns of these pillars inside of the transistor. And as you can see, on the surface, if you change individual atoms, the composition or the type of the atom and their position, the functionality of this transistor can change dramatically. So what this more modern example tells you is that now we have to think about the materials really with this atomic precision, and we need to have the tools and the ways to predict how these materials will operate. So this brings me to the core of my research that is called nanomaterials on demand. So what this picture here represents is a very famous material science tetrahedron, which tells you that by changing how you process the materials, or what is the temperature, what is the pressure at which you produce the material, this processing way will change the structure of the materials. The structure of the materials will eventually change the properties, and properties will eventually change the performance of the materials that you're dealing with. So we are applying this very famous material science tetrahedron on the example of nanomaterials. So we design the ways how we can synthesize these materials. We are designing new methods how we can observe these materials, not only the structure, but also the properties of the materials. And eventually we use these materials to design new types of enhanced devices. This is an example of a transparent solar cell that I designed with my research group at MIT. And what you can see here in this picture is a blurred image. And in fact, this blurred part of the image represents a solar cell that is transparent. So it's a functional device. It's a piece of a material that absorbs the light and transforms it into electricity. And it's still transparent. We can still see through it. So you can envision using this on your windows. So where the window still keeps its functionality, but it still generates the light. So these are all very exciting possible applications of the nanomaterials in which we tailor each particular part of this device. For example, here we use nanoparticle to absorb light. We use nanowires to transform or to transport the current that is produced by absorbing that light. We use graphene, which is single atom layer thin material, to collect that electricity. And we do this at ambient processing conditions, which means that we can produce this in large scales at relatively mild conditions. So these are examples from my research, but you can ask a question, where is the material science going from here? Where you, as future students in material science, can be engaged. And there are many grand challenges that have been identified that will directly impact the life, the quality of life, our understanding of the world around us, and the ways to protect our environment, where material science can play a significant role. These are just some of the grand challenges like energy and environment, health and medicine, human technology transfer, quantum-enabled science technology, understanding how materials behave under extreme environments. For all of these efforts, we really need talented students like yourselves. We need your ideas, your enthusiasm, and we really look forward to working with bright students like yourself. So these are just some of my group members that I'm very much proud of. And the reason why I'm emphasizing some of the examples here from many students that I work with is just to let you know that by studying material science, there are many career options that open up for you. There are some of the examples of my students who became professors like myself. Some of them became policymakers, so they influenced the science policies around the world. Some of them started their startup companies. Some of them eventually ended up as financial advisors, and they work in, very different disciplines than the material science. So what I wanted to say with this example is that the knowledge and the skills that you learn by studying material science really open up many opportunities in life. So I'm a very strong believer in diversity, not only gender diversity, but diversity of ideas and themes in general. And there is a large number of studies that have shown that men and women have very different approaches in solving complex problems. And material science is an interdisciplinary field in which the diversity of ideas and understanding how we can approach relatively complex problems from different angles is really important. And for that reason, diversity is extremely important. By being engaged in material science, you will have an opportunity to make a difference in the world. You have a chance to be creative and apply your passion to change the world. You will, as I mentioned, have plenty of career options, and eventually engineers are paid well, which is always an added benefit. I always believed in diversity, and for that reason, I was engaged in many of the outreach and many of the diversity efforts throughout my career, and I'm very much proud of all of my students, some of the best of whom have been really these amazing candidates that you see in pictures here. So with this, I would like to thank you for your attention. And I do hope that you will consider material science as a discipline that you can be passionate about. And I look forward to seeing you on campus eventually. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Graduck, for the very interesting talk about the work done by your group and showcasing to us how important material science is in our daily lives. I'm sure you have piqued the interest of the audience to learn more about material science and the opportunity it offers in various fields. Next up, we have Dr. Shan Cho, who is currently the Senior Manager of the Front-End Process Equipment Engineering Diffusion Department in Micron. She started her foray in material science and engineering during her undergraduate studies at the University of Science Malaysia, and later did her PhD at MSE in the US. The strong foundation in material physics and device fabrication, which she honed during her study at NUS, has granted her the technical skills required to effectively lead the NAND cell evolution team to develop solutions and technologies, thereby accelerating the manufacturability and marketability of various Micron innovations, which are key enablers to first-to-market, best-in-class devices. Dr. Cho, please.
Yeah, I'm Srijan from Micron. Thanks for giving the opportunity for the talk. And I will, before kickstart my journey as an MSE student to Micron, I would like to give more introductions about what is Micron and what Micron is doing.
Newton's first law states that an object persists in a state of rest unless acted upon by another force. Nowhere is this more true than with our data. Oceans of insight lying dormant, still, unengaged. And when idleness is the enemy of possibility, we revolutionize, we rethink, we transform. Because today's data doesn't just reside, it lives.
It's the spark that makes you feel alive. Feel alive. Feel alive. It's the spark that makes you feel alive. Feel alive. Feel alive. It's the spark that makes you feel
Micron is where data lives.
I hope you guys enjoy the videos that Micron provided, and I would like to give a general information about what is Micron. Micron is actually manufactures memory, storage, and accelerator hardware and solution. Our ability to manipulate semiconductor materials at the nanoscale make us able to fabricate the places where data lives. And that means Micron is where data goes to work, enabling the world to turn data into insight and competitive edge. Micron is where data comes to life, going from a simple store to the living heart of computing. We make the places where data becomes intelligence. And Micron's vision is to transform how the world uses information to enrich life for all. And AI-driven science is literally changing the way we explore our world. For centuries, we have proposed theories and tested those theories with data. Now we can allow theories to arise directly from the data, simultaneously measure every possible variables without being biased by preconceived ideas. So Micron is a global leaders in memory and storage. We are the fourth largest semiconductor company in the world. And then we are number one in the automotive and supplier to top 10 OEMs company. And we also top in the networking memories. So where is Micron? Micron is all around you actually, from the cell phones that you are actually using day by day. There's an AI accelerator chip requires memory. You will see the memory of flash module inside your cell phone and no flash chip. And importantly, the flash cards that store memory. So Micron produce memory solution to the customer. And then have you ever wondered how is a memory chip is being made? So first, very simple, we will require our raw material to be the sand, to be extracted the silicon dioxide, to convert into the pure silicons, whereby they are molded into a raw wafer thin disk. And our front-end engineer team will actually come together to ensure the wafer chip will undergo more than 1,000 process steps where different kinds of materials are deposited and crafted into pattern using reactive gases repeatedly in our highly automated production line, which we will then pass on to our back-end team to make into those familiar black rectangular chips we see commonly. To show your creativity, this is actually similar to our daily life, how you make the waffles, which you can see easily purchased from the bakery. So we'll just need a flour, in turn become batter after mixing the ingredients like milk, egg, water into the waffle machine. With that said, I hope all of you have a better understanding of what Micron does, and it did inspire you to be a part of this beautiful wafer making team in future. And then Microns come with a very rich portfolio of our products and solution addresses critical needs in many different market verticals. Our approach to vertical product development allows us to maintain laser focus on product design for specific market needs. So we have AI. We actually have supporting 5G, gaming, automotive, personal computing, consumer, data center, graphics industry, mobile, and networking. So the entire Micron is actually expanding with the from the 5G smartphone to the AI-enabled cloud. We really need a lot of memory. So in order to address the 2030 era demands for the memory, Micron plans to invest more than $150 billion globally in manufacturing and R&D over the next decades. So that just the first step, securing access to leading edge memory is a long-term investment that also requires sustained government support. So where are we in Singapore? So as I mentioned, that we have Woodlands, we have No Coast, and we have the Bentimil, and headquarters is actually based in the United States. And today, Micron Singapore is actually taking up 9,000 team members and is being the great place to work 3 in a row from 2019, 2021. And recently, we just awarded as 2021, number 6 great place to work. And Singapore side is actually focusing on a NAND memory, which is one of the memories solutions that we're working on. And they are also having a lot of employee resources groups. We have a Micron Women Leadership Network group. We also have a Micron Young Professional, Capable, and Monza. So help the team member to grow, to have a more diverse and equality and inclusions of the team members in the company. So under the global operations, we split into like front-end manufacturing, back-end manufacturing, facility, procurement, supply chain, information technology, and quality. And front-end manufacturing, back-end manufacturing, facility, quality, they are highly involved material science engineering students. Changing more focusing on Micron support a lot of women leaders growth. So we're actually having an ERG, we call it Micron Women Leader Networking. And this provides an equal opportunity for the women to progress in their career in the company. So we have a lot of activity, a lot of leadership trainings that we provide opportunity and grow more women's leaders in the future. Before going to the next slide, talking about more towards myself as my journey in Micron, I would like to share with you some statistics. So overall in Micron Singapore, we are actually having about 32% of the women in the engineering. So this is one of the highest women's hiring, or maybe women's engineers across the entire Micron global sites. The next one, I would like to talk about how I end up today from material science students to the Micron employee. So I actually started my bachelor degree in 2003 and to 2007. I actually pick up the material science. And after that, I continued to pursue my PhD in material science and engineering in NUS Singapore. So why I so inspired and why I choose material science and engineering is because of the curiosities that I would like to understand why each of the material is so important and how we engineering the materials that it can actually give us the different properties of the material. And how I inspired this too is because of one of the back into my secondary school time, there was a movie called Titanic. And what impressing about me is not about the love story about the movie, but it's more toward the science behind why the Titanic ship is actually catastrophic fail when it came to closing to the iceberg, where the entire temperature for the ship or the material is actually changing from the ductile fracture to the brittle fracture behavior. Because of that, the material property change was not really understood in very, very old time during the Titanic is being built. That leads to a lot of catastrophic failures in the later stage. So this movie is actually inspired me is that I would like to find out more about materials. So if you're able to understand more deep about the material science, you should or you have avoided such tragedy in past. So what is material science engineering? Towards my bachelor degree after my PhD, material science is really relating to structures. How this material structure is being, what is the structure of this material? And then how you process it. How you process it and how the structure of the material is the one that determines the properties and also the performances of the materials that you build or the end product that the customer is using today. So inside the material science, I actually they are categorized into 3 types of material in terms of the electronics theory. So we have the metal, we have a semiconductor and insulator. I spent a lot of time during my bachelor's degree and also my PhD, study a lot in the semiconductor material, whereby lead me to my current company, which is Micron. That is one of the semiconductor company. So I actually spent about 4 years in my bachelor's degree and then 8 years of the PhD, another 4 years in my PhD study on the material science. So I consciously and unconsciously, I gain a lot of understanding about the material properties. I gain a lot of the soft skills that I have, such as project management, such as the paper writing. Because in Micron, what I'm doing today, we do open up a forum paper writing for the team members to publish their works. So all this making me my journey in Micron is pretty success. And after the graduations of my PhD from NUS, I actually started off as in Micron immediately. In MSB, I work as a supplier quality engineer because we also need to understand different material behaviors that lead to the productions of what we manufacture, the chips. So I spend a lot of time auditing the suppliers in Tokyo, in Japan, China, and also Taiwan. So this is one of the pictures that I visited Tokyo during the time. And then after that, I heavily involved into how we manufacture the wafer chip. So I actually transitioned my career to become a process development engineer, which I part of the core team in the R&D to really working on how to engineer the film for better performance in the device. So I actually spent about 4 years in my career as an engineer. And then later on, I've been promoted to become a manager, leading the entire small team for the process. Later on, right now, I actually the senior manager, managing a bigger team, taking an even bigger role to manage the entire team, bringing the team to lead to the 140 series, or maybe in market, 176 still NAND products that is ramping nowadays. I think most of that wonder how the MSE actually leads me to my career today. So from my team, I always tell them that engineering film, engineering performances, and this is the visions of my team. So how we make, for example, when we're selling the chips, why the automobile chip can be selling in a very high price, while the normal consumer thumb drive is actually cheaper, because of the different requirements and also the memory space or density of the memory, or maybe the reliability of the memory that changes the different price for the chips. So how we do it is we can actually manipulate the film towards the requirements of the customer that we want. So for example, in terms of, I can give an example like channel. Channel is actually, we are actually trying to conduct the electron. So how effective that we want to make it more conductive. They are actually come with what I study in the material science is we need to understand what is a large grain size. How are we going to produce the large grain size of this channel. So it can come with like epitaxial, single crystal silicon. We have a metal-induced lateral crystallization. I know all these terms are really rare for all of you, but once you go through the MSE courses, you are actually thinking that all this being taught, and all this is what we really using in industry today. So on top of that, I also want to add on one more thing is a lot of characterization, how we want to classify or maybe test out the material. Wherever you study in the school, the machine is actually what we are using in industry today. I would say that without whether it's a consciously knowledge or unconscious skills that I gained throughout my 8 years in MSE, will really lead me to an easier path for me in industry, especially in semiconductor in Micron. I think this is my last slide, and I would like to end my today's talk with engineering film, engineering performance, and this is how materials science students actually having a benefit in semiconductor world. I hope I inspire all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cho, for the insightful talk on your experience working in Micron, a semiconductor company. I'm sure the minds of both our current students and prospective students are put at ease knowing that NUS MSE prepares her students to be industry-ready graduates. The affirmation that the relevance of the courses offered by NUS MSE to the industry would instill confidence that MSE at NUS is the way to go. Last but not least, we have Dr. Yang Le, a scientist at the Institute of Materials Research and Engineering, IMRI, A*STAR. Dr. Le leads the Printed Organic Flexible Electronic and Sensors Group, focusing on luminescent materials, flexible electronics, and smart biosensors. No stranger to the local material research ecosystem, Dr. Le is an active executive member of the Materials Research Society Singapore and has chaired numerous conferences and outreach events. She is also a recipient of the Career Development Award, Central Research Fund, and finalist in the Singapore L'Oreal UNESCO for Women in Science Fellowship 2018. More recently, she was awarded the Singapore 100 Women in Tech 2021. Dr. Le, please.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this outreach session with us. And I am Dr. Yang Le, who will give a short chat with you over the next 15 minutes or so. So at the moment, I am with the Institute of Materials Research and Engineering, or IMRI, of A*STAR, where I am a scientist and also group leader. So my group is called Profess, as you can see on the screen here, and I'll give a little bit of introduction to what we do later on, explain a little bit of what we do. So today my talk will be essentially from a primarily research-centric point of view and perspective, and hope that's useful or interesting for you. All right, so first up, a little bit of my history and background. I did my basic education locally in Singapore, and I was fortunate enough to be the first batch of the integrated program, IP program in Singapore. And for my JC, I was among the first batch of the then new A-levels syllabus. After that, I went on to do my higher education in overseas universities in the UK, actually, throughout. And I ended up at Cambridge for quite a few years at the end. So that's my brief background. And back home in Singapore, I've been at the Institute of Materials Research and Engineering, IMRI, of A*STAR for the past 4 years. And more recently, I started a group called Profess. It stands for Printed Organic Flexible Electronics and Sensors in IMRI here. So the full name is quite a mouthful, so I hope that the Profess acronym can be more catchy. So even more recently, a few months ago, I also took up the adjunct assistant professorship at the Department of Materials of Science and Engineering at the National University of Singapore. So at the same time, I have been quite active as well in the professional ecosystem, the research professional ecosystem, especially in the Materials Research Society Singapore, or MRSS, where I have organized and chaired many conferences and events, and where I also sit on the executive committee. So in a nutshell, that's what I'm up to right now. So next few slides, we will look a little bit closer at what our group does in terms of research, a little sneak peek into what's behind Profess. So we have generally categorized our research directions into these three main bubbles. First, turquoise bubble here is on wearables and sensors, currently aiming at the medtech and health tech applications. And that's followed by the yellow bubble here, the luminescent materials for optoelectronics. And lastly, energy efficient processes or devices. And underlying everything, it's a slight emphasis towards printing techniques and solution processing of materials, hence the printed part of the Profess group name. So we work a lot with organic and polymer materials, which tend to be soft and flexible as well. So next I will introduce a little bit further into what we do. I will lump the yellow and green bubbles together on optoelectronics and talk a little bit on it before sharing a little bit on the first turquoise bubble on wearables and sensors. Right, so basically why organics for optoelectronics is because these materials, the organics or polymers, have been widely established as useful building blocks for many electronics and other applications because they are light, they're flexible, sometimes they are stretchable as well. Most of the time they can be printable and easily tunable, and most importantly they have very unique and interesting electronic and optical properties to be harvested, right? So to simply illustrate, they can absorb or emit rather easily in the visible light range, right? And they also have these excitons. And excitons are basically bound electron hole pairs. So the excitons in organic materials are usually very small, very localized, and very tightly bound. And they are also spin dependent. So the electron hole pairs, they have a spin dependency that's associated with them, and it gives them different properties and different behaviors. So it depends on how we excite the materials, right? How whether we shine light on them, on the materials, or we inject them with electrical energy. So it depends on how we excite, give the material some energy to excite it. The excitons will then behave differently accordingly. So how they behave is known as photophysics, and these processes, these behavior is what we want to study and characterize. And by looking at the photophysical processes in these semiconductor materials, we can then harvest and utilize these processes towards useful applications. So some examples on screen here you see, like for example, agri-tech, display, lighting, energy harvesting, and so on. And lastly, of course, after having the applications, we hope also to elucidate some ideas on design guide or design rules on making new materials in the future. So on screen here you can see some pictures of visual representations of what these luminescent materials can do and achieve. Next we will look at some of the wearables and sensors. So the main framework we are looking at here is on developing flexible sweat sensors, and that's towards a whole non-invasive and hence sweat continuous real-time wearable sensors for biochemical metabolite. As you're probably more familiar with things like Fitbits and Apple Watches. So those trackers are able to monitor many of our physical parameters, for example, our heart rate, our blood pressure, blood oxygen content, how far we've walked, how many calories we burned. Those are slightly more on the physical side of measurements. So here in this slide, we see a slightly more biochemical emphasis on detecting the chemical metabolites, chemical biomarkers that we can find in our sweat. So we do that, we achieve that by making printable, printed electrochemical sensors or devices in that sense. So we go all the way from developing the designing and developing the electrodes and the inks, and all the way to integrating the sensors onto a usable device. To give you an easier representation, visual representation, I think we are all visual animals. We absorb a little bit better by imagery, graphics, rather than text and verbal words. So I'll show you a very short 1-minute video to illustrate what this process looks like.
Start by screen printing the electrodes from our own formulations on flexible sheets.
followed by functionalizing the electrodes into various electrochemical sensors with nanomaterials and enzymes. The multiplexed sensor patch is then integrated with a PCB and power source and connected wirelessly to a mobile app. So here we see some benchtop testing by sequential dropping of biomarker solutions, and we see the signal changes detected on the app screen. The red trace just now was glucose solution, while the purple one you see here is creatinine. Lastly, we show the sensors working in real life by attaching the device to a runner's arm and observe the real-time traces. So our colleague running here is a very healthy man, and in his sweat we see some presence of lactate, which was the orange trace just now, and some uric acid, the green trace here, with no detection of glucose and creatinine, just as expected. All right, so that's that. And next up, well, this is a career talk, right? So I should give some advice on how you, the bright minds of tomorrow, can prepare and plan for the immediate future. Right, so the imminent issue that I'm asked to address specifically on this session would be women in STEM, women in science and technology. So my main message would be that do not let your gender define you, and let your work speak for yourself instead. So of course this comes from, I'm coming from a STEM research perspective, and in recent years there's been a lot of emphasis on women in science and tech, and that should be highly emphasized and encouraged as well. It should be something that we should allow to flourish and blossom, definitely. But this emphasis can have an impact on you individually, and that impact can go either way. Right, so sometimes I would say that to be very, very honest, in general in society there can be a sense of, positive prejudice is still prejudice kind of attitude. I think we should bear in mind and be very aware that this should not be a sentiment that should make you feel that you don't deserve your achievements. As if you've got there by having special treatment, which you don't. You definitely earned where you are, earned the achievements, and get to where you are today. But of course, at the same time, let your work speak for yourself. Let your work speak for itself and yourself, rather than being identified by your gender. So I think that's a very critical point for many young women or lady or girls nowadays in STEM, science and tech. But of course, having said that, please do seize all opportunities. Do not shy away from any of these chances. We are blessed with many of these, women in STEM opportunities. It's our era, it's our time. So please take the chance to grasp it. Do not shy away from it. So, for example, I was fortunate enough to have received some of these women in tech recognitions in the past years. And, if you have the chance, please grasp them as well. They will be very helpful to, boost your confidence, your career, your network, your visibility, and so on. And so basically, seize the chances when you get them. We shouldn't let our gender define you, so I will not focus too much on the women in STEM for the rest of the talk. This will be the only place where we speak of it. So the next few slides, we will look at some general key points. There are 3 key points that I always like to highlight to young students, and that's definitely regardless of your gender. So I hope I'm speaking and appealing to all of you in the audience here. So first up, keep your options open. So if you look at the comic here, you can take a minute to look at it. The crocodile is definitely being pigeonholed into certain standard options already, not given much of a creative choice. So basically, if you found your calling, if you know very strongly what you want to do, please go for it and be a go-getter. Right. But at this age, if you're still unsure, that's very, very normal. Please don't be too fixated on anything too early. It's all right. You can always keep your options still open at this stage, because, we would change as we grow. The world around us would change as we grow, as time passes. We don't know what the future holds for us, right? So what I want to bring across is that planning is not deciding. We can always be aware of the changes around us and be prepared to try new things, but it doesn't mean that we have to make a solid decision easily and quickly. We can always start with some elimination first. Cancel out some options that are not suitable for you. You don't like them. Not suited for your strengths or personalities. that can be a starting point. So, keep your options open. Now, the second thing is going back to this seizing opportunities again. So I fully believe that we will never know what we haven't tried. So it's always good to take chances, to try different attachments, internships, and experiences. Talk to people, put yourself out there, reach out to more people. But of course, take all what you hear with a pinch of salt. Because during career talks, you usually hear the rosy side of things, including this talk here. My personal opinions, I might be just bringing you across the rosier side of things, right? So when you meet people, befriend them and find out the truth behind, the honest opinions behind certain professions, whether it's research or not. Find out the shortcomings and disadvantages of some professions or disciplines. If you're choosing where to study, what to study, we are all distinct individuals. We are all people with a very subjective mind. As I'm talking to you now, my opinions that I'm sharing here are also my personal subjective views, right? So you need to judge for yourself what's suitable for you after trying out different things and talking to different people. So that's the second general note. And lastly, if you take a minute to look at this comic as well, there is no shortcuts. You need to develop skills, and skills take time to develop. Portfolios take time to build. So you should, always seek to develop yourself and better yourselves. Basically build a better you. That's very critical, because most of these things are translational skills, no matter what profession you take up. Whether it's research or not, it's something that will enrich you further down the road, regardless of what you do. For example, at this juncture, you're probably choosing your university experience. So, always aim for a great education, take grasp of whatever chances you get at education and maximize your exposure. Try yourself out at, things like leadership, communication, writing, presentation, thinking skills, interpersonal skills, soft skills, and so on. They will be useful at some point in your career. There's no doubt. And again, I want to emphasize there is no shortcut. You need the time to develop yourself, build a better you, and build that credential and portfolio. So that's the three main things. So I'm also asked to say about, I think, how did I end up here, or what's my opinions or options along the way. So, well, basically, let me just flash all the points here. So basically, I started off looking at the very bio side of things since, secondary school, JC, at your age as well. And even in the early years of university, I was always looking at science, but I was looking at the more bio side of science. I did my undergraduate in chemistry, and I was always looking at biological chemistry, medicinal chemistry. But halfway through my university, I realized that that's really not my cup of tea, because I need a lot of organic synthesis, organic chemistry to pull it off. And I just absolutely disliked that part of chemistry. So going back to, keeping our options open and never know what we haven't tried, this is something that's unexpected. So in my last couple of years in university, I started to get more in touch with, physical chemistry, working with batteries, polymers, semiconductors, and that got me onto my subsequent path. So after university, I did my research work on polymer, solar cells, printed electronics, and that got me further onto this topic of soft optoelectronics, printable electronics, and that's how I chose my PhD in physics, in optoelectronics physics, and I worked on organic and hybrid electronics and LEDs and so on, and so that's how I got down that road. And of course, as you heard earlier, more recently, my current work revolve around both wearable electronics, wearable sensors, electrochemical sensors, and my expertise on luminescent materials and optoelectronics. So that's how I took my options along the way, keeping my options open and trying out different things and sort of, gradually found my way through it. Yeah, so I have been in research for quite a few years now, if you count my PhD and pre-PhD days. And this little cartoon here illustrates some of the pros and cons of academia, of research, basically. So going back to my previous point on talk to people, find out the pros and the cons, which are very important before you jump into a new field or profession or discipline. Yeah. And with that, I will end my talk here. So you can always reach out and contact us. And most of this page is illustrating that research is never a solo effort. It involves many, many people. And this list here is not even exhaustive. And I will not read out all their names. But basically, almost everything we do is not a solo effort, right? It's a collaborative effort, even more so in research. So this is my contact. Please feel free to reach out to me. And I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Le. Personally, I'm really inspired by your words of wisdom to grab all the opportunities that are present to learn and grow. And I'm sure that our audience feel very much the same way. Because as a student, I think if we do not speak up or speak out, we are not able to learn as effectively as we would otherwise. Now that we are done with the first half of the webinar, we will begin the Q&A session. I will invite now the panelists to turn on the cameras, and I will read out the questions that have been submitted by the audience. So the first one would be, it's actually addressed to Dr. Cho. So one of the students asking if you're, a candidate, one from a material science background and the other from perhaps an electrical engineering background, applies to Micron, which candidate would you choose to join your team?
Yeah, thank you for the questions. I'm Srijan. I actually represent Micron's to answer these questions. From under my team, I'm actually working as a process team. So I will actually prefer the material science students rather than the electrical student, because inside the process team, we actually need to understand how the fabrication process, we need to understand what is the properties of the material, because with that information, we can actually engineering how we process it and how we're going to make the properties that we really want for our customer. So I always think that most of the people will think that this is a semiconductor, is supposed to relate to the electrical engineering student, but in fact it's not. So inside a semiconductor company, we do need material science students that help to improve our process and make the products that we really need for our future technology.
Thank you, Dr. Cho. Another question is from a Polytechnic student who's studying mechanical engineering. And the student is wondering whether it is possible for him or her to actually apply to NUS since he's interested to join an MSE after attending the talk. Perhaps I can direct this to Prof. Blackwood to answer.
Yeah, okay. The way that we're working now, because we've now gone to the College of Engineering, you might have, not College of Engineering, College of Design and Engineering. So we have a uniform intake. So as long as your diploma from Polytechnic was recognized by one of the departments in the faculty. So if your diploma was recognized by mechanical engineering previously, then you'll be able to apply for any of the departments in the new college. So as long as your diploma was previously recognized by the Department of Mechanical Engineering, you can apply to MSE. Okay. So hopefully the answer is yes. But I didn't actually see what the specific diploma was from the student.
Oh, okay, the student mentioned mechanical engineering.
But it's mechanical engineering at which poly and things like that. Okay, so that's,
yeah, it was
yes. But if it's mechanical engineering, then I think ME department accredits it, all the mechanical engineering diplomas from all the polys, so they would all be allowed to apply to MSE now.
I see. Thank you, Prof. Blackwood. Okay, the other question, one is directed to Dr. Le. The question is, would I need a PhD to join A-star?
Hi, thanks for the question. I hope my voice sounds okay because I was told it might be a bit echoey where I am. I hope you can hear me clearly.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah, the answer is definitely yes. Without a PhD, you can definitely join A-star. There are different career tracks in A-star. For example, if you would like to be on the technical side, doing the research in the labs itself, there are what we call a research specialists or research officers, which don't require you to have a PhD. They are similar, a little bit similar to the research assistant roles in universities, if I could draw a parallel there. If you want to step away a little bit away from, in the lab kind of technical roles, there are also, for example, project managers, industry industry development offices, business development offices that we need as well. Which would appreciate you to have a technical background, such as in MSE, but you don't have to have a PhD. And of course, there is also the entirely non-technical roles, more administrative and corporate services roles in A-star as well. So yes, definitely you can join A-star in different tracks without a PhD. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Le. One more question is, does PhD graduates have an advantage over non-PhD graduates? I think maybe we can direct this to Dr. Cho to answer.
Yeah, I would say that in company perspective in Microns, we actually I would say that for a PhD graduate, you will start your career in a different ranking when you join the Micron, or versus the non-PhD graduate. For example, I would say that if you are coming from the bachelor degree, you will be joining as an engineer as an E1 level. This is the basic level for the engineer. But if you graduated as a PhD graduate, you could be ended up in the engineering level 3, because we actually counted the PhD research experiences as your part of your experiences. So I would say that will it be an advantage or no advantage? I would say that it's actually well attributes to the time and experience that you gain. So if you come without a PhD research experience, then you will be going with the engineer level 1. And then if you have PhD, they will reward you in level 3. But if you leverage it to the time, they're actually the same, I would say. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Cho. Another question is, there's a attendee who's asking, who's a little bit confused on how to balance family and work as a woman, such as asking what age is suitable to have a baby as a female research worker. So I guess perhaps she's a bit concerned that she may be like set back in terms of promotion and all this. So maybe anyone from the panelists can advise or give their take on the matter.
Maybe actually I can take these questions for your information. I graduated a PhD students, and then I married, and then throughout the almost 9 years career in Micron, I do have 2 babies with me. 2 daughters that are born during this periods of time. I would say that which age is suitable to have a baby, it depends on how you want to put your life in. However, that we sometimes it's ourselves that determines the pace and also the tunes in your career. So it doesn't mean that you have a baby, you have to slow down or whatever, because today Singapore is actually coming with like a daycare center that are helping you to take care of your children, or you can actually have getting some helpers, with the maids that you can actually hire, or any your parents or parents-in-law that can help you to take care of it. So it depends how you want to build your family at your own. But I would say that it's a challenging to balance between both of them, but it means that it's not saying that it's not possible. So I'm a very good example that I manage everything on my own. I don't have a maid at home. I don't have a parents-in-law right now. I don't even have my parents staying with me. But I send my children to the daycare centers every day, and then I come to work. So in Micron, we also provide some flexibility for the working mothers. You can actually, maybe today you need to send your children late, and then you can actually come late to work, and then you just compensate it with a long late going back to work. So I would say that the flexibility in the companies actually help to support all these working women today. So I hope I answered your questions, and I hope I'm the live examples that can help the women to inspire you to continue to contribute into the industry.
Thank you, Dr. Cho. I think it's really nice that you can give your own personal experience to this, because I think for a lot of women, career women at least, they find that it's actually very difficult for them to decide which one. I mean, they want both, but then it could be a bit of a challenge. So it's really nice that you could give your take on it. Another one is the daily life of a process engineer mostly in the office or in the factories? And is it really a hands-on kind of job?
Okay, maybe I can. This is more towards like a company based, how you work as a process engineer in the company. I also can give some perspective on that. Process engineers, especially when you're actually joining the Micron, we're actually giving about training for how you want to use all the application, how you want to manage the works that you are working on. And then we also are having a pretty good start for you for your onboarding, like 6 months, that we expect you have a smooth transition to this industry. So how you do your daily life in the company is we just have a wafer fabs that as a process engineer, you might not need to be inside the fab for like throughout your entire 10 hours or 8 hours of the working hours in there, because especially in Micron's front-end technology, we are actually automated a lot of things that we can actually remote into our machine. And then we can create our recipe, running our process through remoting from your desk to the machine inside the factory. So I would say that is sometimes I also can remote and controlling the machine through home. So I would say that with the current technology, it puts our works much more simplified in that way.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Cho. Yeah, so some questions related to the curriculum. So one of them being, is having a physics background or knowledge important to pursue an MSE degree? So maybe Prof. Blackwood can answer this.
If you don't have physics, we can give you physics bridging modules. MSE is a sort of cross between physics, chemistry, biology, and the other engineering subjects. My own background is chemistry rather than physics, and I have colleagues that are more physics. So it's always difficult to say which is more important, physics or chemistry. It really, in your first 2 years, it doesn't make much difference. And in your third year, you can sort of say, do I like chemistry? Do I like physics? I think one of our panelists started off in chemistry side and moved to the physics side. So you will need O-level physics or an equivalent to apply, but you don't need H2 physics. And the reverse applies to chemistry. You need O-level chemistry. We don't need H2 chemistry. We do need one or the other. To catch up on both would be difficult. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Blackwood. Another question is, what is the gender ratio for MSc in NUS?
Most years it's been around 30% female. We'd like to raise that, but that's been over the last 10 years, that's probably about the average 30 to 35% female students.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so maybe I can ask the last question. Maybe I can direct it to Dr. Le. I would say probably A-star is something in between academia and industry. It's not truly industry. So what made you decide to join a research institute rather than stay on in the industry? I mean, stay on in academia or proceed to the industry?
Thanks for the question. So yes, we can think of A-star as being a bridge between academic research and industry. But A-STAR is a very big organization, and under A-STAR, there are multiple research institutes and individual labs, and each one has a different focus. Some are more similar to academic university kind of research infrastructure, and some are more towards very focused on industry collaboration, industry projects. So I myself am now part of IMRI, and our group has a goal, or our goal is basically very similar to university academic research. And that's what I'm personally interested in. Why I took up, why did I end up in A-STAR was primarily because of my scholarship, and therefore I have a duty, obligation towards serving my bond here. And I chose where I am because I'm still more interested in the slightly more upstream, slightly more, academic type of research, and that's how I ended up here. Yeah, but if any one of you are more interested in the more applied downstream or industry facing kind of work, there's lots of opportunities here as well, especially if you have a MSE materials science and engineering training. That's very helpful. And as Professor Blackwood has mentioned, MSE is an extremely interdisciplinary discipline, right? You need multiple disciplines to complete your course, and you're kind of equipped with it's a multifaceted preparation for your job next time, for your career. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Le. I think with that, we've come to the end of today's webinar session. On behalf of the organizing committee, I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to the speakers and Prof. Blackwood for taking the time out of their busy schedule to attend today's session. Thank you for making today's webinar a success. To the audience, we hope today's session has been a fruitful one for you, and we look forward to seeing you in the upcoming sessions on the dates as mentioned, as shown on the screen. If you'd like to know more, you can scan the QR code to obtain more details. And the one that is upcoming next is the one on artificial intelligence, to be held on 14th of January. You can sign the QR code, as I mentioned, to sign up. And if you have any further questions to ask with regards to admissions, you can scan this QR code as shown right now. So thank you very much for today, and we hope to see you again in our upcoming sessions. Thank you.